Shalom and greetings, friends. Thank you for clicking on this video teaching titled Good Friday and Easter Sunday. Now please do not get offended by any of the plain truth that is offered in this message. For example, the word Easter is nowhere to be found in the Holy Scriptures. Well then, where did it come from? How did it get its name, and what are the origins of Easter? And is every Easter Sunday, every annual Easter Sunday, the actual anniversary of the resurrection of the Messiah? Well, let's go to the Scriptures. Now, if you dig out the old King James Version, you'll find the word Easter once in the book of Acts, but again, look at the Greek word. It sounds more like Pesach, which is Hebrew. The Hebrew word for Pesach we translate as Passover. But the word Easter is nowhere to be found, and please do not get it confused with the book of Esther. Yes, Esther is a Babylonian name as well, which with Babylonian origins, and a Jewish woman, Mordecai, encouraged her to change her name to a Babylonian name. She had a Jewish name, and it was changed to a Babylonian name so that the Persians would not know that she was Jewish. And it was our Creator's form of espionage, I guess you could say, to help a Jewish woman become the queen of Persian Empire at that time, and to help save the Jewish people from annihilation. So, but please, the book of Esther, it sounds like Easter, but Easter has origins that even go back before Esther. And it's not Hebraic, it's not Jewish, of course, and although the Jewish Messiah from Nazareth was crucified, and he rose from the dead on the first day of the week, we need to understand the origins. Well, Good Friday, you know, the Scriptures reveal by his own words, the Messiah's own words, that he was not crucified on a Friday. So let's go to, for example, he says in Matthew, or we say in Hebrew, Matthew, chapter 12 and verse 38. And please don't get offended if this is new to you. Those of you who are Christians out there and keeping Good Friday and Easter Sunday, if you haven't heard this information, please be like the Bereans, who searched the Scriptures daily to see if what the Apostle Shaul, or some of you call him Paul, what he was teaching, is it really right? So check up on me. And here in Matthew chapter 12 and verse 38 it says, Then some of the scribes and Pharisees answered, saying, Teacher, we want to see a sign from you. And he answered and said to them, An evil and adulterous generation seeks after a sign, and no sign will be given to it except the sign of the prophet Jonah. And what is the sign of the prophet Jonah? Well, he answers that in verse 40. Key verse here. For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth, let me read this, in the great fish, Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish, so the Son of Man will be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. So it doesn't take much math intelligence or rocket scientists to try to come up with 3 days and 3 nights, and see, you can't from Friday, Good Friday afternoon or evening, until Sunday morning. And well, some people, Protestant theologians, who hate to accept that it was the Catholics and it was Roman Emperor Constantine who brought this practice into Christianity for the first time in the 4th century, they don't like to admit it. Of course, Protestants were protesting the Catholics, and they don't like to admit they've adopted a lot of theology from the Catholics, modern theologians. But truly, when you look at the origins, Good Friday Well, let's look at that. You know, we could see that even the Messiah was resurrected before sunrise Sunday morning. It was before sunrise, and we're going to go to those scriptures and we're going to see. But if you try to count 3 days and 3 nights, and the intellectual theologians will say, well, maybe heart of the earth doesn't mean death, doesn't mean the tomb. Maybe it means when he was betrayed by Judas. That's the starting of the 3 days and 3 nights. And he was in the heart of the darkness, the evil forces of this earth. And so they claim, well, then he was in this kangaroo mock trial with the high priest in the temple right there in Jerusalem. This mock trial on him. Well, is that the heart of the earth? The whole, well, some people, well, maybe not that. Well, how about when he went to Pilate? Let's try to count 3 days and 3 nights when he went to Pilate and Herod, and he was in the Roman court system, the darkest, empire. Well, there was other dark empires at that time, but, could that be the heart of the earth? And I've tried coming up with a 3 days and 3 nights with both those interpretations, and I still can't seem to find it. When we look at the scriptures accurately and we compare the 4 Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and I can't do it. If you can do it, please explain it to me. Help me understand when these 3 days and 3 nights start and when they finish. But what I propose to you, please listen to this teaching and see if it either debunks your understanding or if you can debunk mine. And you can email off our website. That's on the description of this video message if you want a more private correspondence. If you can be respectful and post it to the whole public on this video, that's fine, as long as there's no name calling or grossly disrespectful correspondence, of course. Let's be like scholars, and let's midrash. Let's be in pursuit of the truth and reason with the scriptures together. So we read there 3 days and 3 nights. He's got to be in the heart of the earth. Most of us understand that as being in a tomb, or we could say he was dead for 3 days and 3 nights. And my understanding currently is posted on the website. If you go to our free articles, I have an article, a free online article, no cost or anything on the website. It's free learning. You can go there. It's titled, Was the Crucifixion on Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday? And obviously it can't be Friday unless there's some understanding out there that I've never heard in the last 38 years of my learning the scriptures from my childhood and from my youth. But and even through a couple years of theology major in college. So I still haven't understand this from the Good Friday, Sunday morning perspective. But, I was challenged, and I've changed my views on this and what I was just taught, as growing up. But let's go to Luke chapter 24. In verse 1, it says, Now, on the first day of the week, or the first of the week, of course this is not the 7th day, it's not the Sabbath or Shabbat, but on the first day, some people say it's Saturday night. That's when the first day actually begins, is after sunset on Saturday. Yes, but notice this, very early in the morning. Go back to the original Greek. It can't be sunset or twilight or dark. It's dawn, as we'll see in the book of John. I'll go to the book of John as well. It's very early in the morning. They, certain other women with them, came to the tomb bringing the spices they had prepared. Of course, they were intending to embalm his body. So they go there very early on what we call Sunday morning, the first day of the week. Now let's go to the book of John, or as we say in Hebrew, Yochanan. Chapter 20, verse 1, it says, On the first of the week, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb early. Now, while it was still dark, that's kind of a hint, while it's still dark, and saw that the tomb, it says, while it was still dark, very early, while it was still dark, he saw that the tomb and the stone had been taken away from the tomb. So we see here that it was in the morning, and also you can go to Matthew and mark, and you can see that they were getting there right about sunrise. We don't know how long it took them to walk there. They started while it was still dark, and then while they were there, the sun was coming up. It's right around dawn, right around the sunrise time period, and he was already gone, which shows that he was already resurrected. He wasn't in the tomb. His body wasn't there in the flesh as a dead body, at dawn, at sunrise. It was before that, sometime during the night, which makes sense. You got 3 days, 3 nights. Not 3 nights and 3 days, but we see the chronological order of 3 days, meaning daylight portions, and there's always a night that follows it, which explains why they were there at the end of the 3rd night, as it was ending, and he was risen. So a part of a day, yes, can be counted as a whole day. As we are born at different times during the day, our birthdays are considered the whole day, or anniversaries. We get married or have marriages at a certain time in the afternoon or day. We count the whole day as an anniversary. So when we're counting 3 days and 3 nights, there is some ambiguous interpretational freedom there, but we still cannot come up with 3 days and 3 nights from Friday afternoon or evening till Sunday morning before the daylight period comes. And so where does this Easter Sunday and Good Friday come from? Yes, as the scriptures say, the Messiah rose on the first day of the week, but it was 3 days and 3 nights after the Passover, as we say the Pesach in Hebrew. And so, as we understand the Hebrew and the Passover, the Pesach can land on any day of the week during the 1st century and before that. Certain postponement rules didn't exist in the Hebrew calendar, in the Jewish Orthodox calendar, until the 4th century. And I'm not talking about postponement calendars, but before that, Passover can land on any day of the week. So that means the anniversary of his resurrection can be any day of the week as well. So why do Christians insist on Sunday morning? And the Pesach is not always the first Sunday or the second Sunday after the spring equinox. Why is Easter always right after the spring equinox? And how does it predate the 1st century by hundreds of years and goes back to the Babylonian practices? Now, if you haven't studied this, research it for yourself. Just Google search origins of Easter, origins of Good Friday, or just type in any of that. Research for yourself, or go to a free video teaching on YouTube as well titled Truth or Tradition by Jim Staley. Great message if you have the time for it. It's about a couple hours perhaps, goes into the origins of Christian holidays, including Christmas as well as Easter. And you'll see as you research this even for yourself, dig up old encyclopedias. Before the Protestants started taking some of this out in the 20th century, if you get back to the 11th edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica, any of the encyclopedias in the 1930s or earlier, you're going to find even more truth, more admission of the origins of these days. But people don't like to learn the origins of these days. And they think, well, I'm okay, and everything is okay, and it doesn't matter to him anymore. But, well, let's look to the scriptures again. Let's go to our scriptures. I'm going to go to a little bit of the Old Testament, as most of you call it, as well as what the Apostle Shaul said about these pagan practices of Easter and pagan idolatry. But let's be careful. If you're not a believer, if you're an atheist, or you just don't believe in Christianity, you don't have a passion for the Messiah and following his ways, then please, this message really won't affect you. I'm not trying to gear this for you. But if you do have a passion and you are keeping these days, please don't get offended. but really research the origins. Where did the Easter eggs? Where do eggs come from? How do bunnies lay eggs? Where do the bunnies and bunnies don't lay eggs? And oh well, if we see these goddesses of fertility under the Babylonian and even in other of the empires that were daughters of Babylon, the Greeks and the Persians, we'll find that the goddesses of fertility, they look to nature, things that reproduce themselves dramatically. Chickens lay a lot of eggs, and bunnies reproduce. So if you want to be fertile as a human, look to these gods of fertility, the bunnies and the eggs. Well, why do they dip eggs in red? It was originally dipped in red, and then later on, now it's multiple colors. Well, on every Easter Sunday, they would take virgin women, these pagan priests, and they would impregnate them on the altars. And these babies would be born 9 months later, and then the next Easter Sunday, they would be 3 months old, and then they would sacrifice. I know it sounds gross and horrible, but we need to know the origins of this. And they were sacrificed. Babies, innocent babies sacrificed on the altars. Human sacrifices, yes. Easter Sunday, that's what it goes back to. And so we see that Easter isn't found in the Scriptures. But we do find what our Creator says about worshiping Him on these type of human sacrifice pagan practices. If we go to Deuteronomy, it says in Deuteronomy chapter 12 and verse 29 through 32, it says, "When the Lord your Creator cuts off from among you the nations which you go to dispossess, and you dispossess them and dwell in their land." So all of us are in lands that have been dispossessed by even pagan cultures. Maybe we're still in a land with pagan cultures and practices that are anti-Christian. But those of us who are in Christian nations, we've dispossessed more pagan cultures, and so this can even be applying to us today. And you displace them. Take heed to yourself that you are not ensnared to follow after them, after they are destroyed from before you. So again, these things are not pagan to me anymore. That's what a lot of people say. That's what they were back then, but it doesn't mean that now. Well, after they are destroyed from before you, and that you do not inquire after their gods, saying, how did these nations serve and worship their God? How did they look to their God all around? And I want to worship the true God, and those are some pretty cool practices. It's fun for the children. They're nice, wonderful little games, and it doesn't mean all that horrible stuff. He says, don't copy how they practice these things and say, I will do likewise. Verse 31, you shall not worship the Lord your Creator in any of those ways. For every abomination to Him that He hates, they even do to their gods. For they even burn their sons and daughters in the fire to their gods. And here we see human sacrifices. And we see that even on Easter Sunday. He's saying, don't copy these practices. If you want to worship the true Creator of this universe and His Son, our Messiah, then you are not to intermingle like Israel did. And Esther, she had to change her name to a Babylonian name for this special purpose of espionage to save the Jewish people. But the Jewish people had blended pagan theology with true theology, and that's why they were dispersed and they were in captivity. They were in this trouble in the first place. If they weren't rebellious and thinking that they could get away with these things and that the Creator will love them anyway, and they got love in their heart for Him and honor them with their lips, that isn't good enough. If you are intermingling hot with cold, with paganism, with truth, we are to be on fire for the truth and put out these bad things that are inappropriate in his eyes. And that's what he is saying here in Deuteronomy. Now, does Shaul do away with this? Does he say, well, the idols don't mean anything, you can blend and mix? Well, some people, actually teach that. But let's go to 1 Corinthians. 1 Corinthians chapter 6, beginning in verse 15, it says, "And what accord has Messiah with Belial?" Or with the adversary? Or what part has a believer with an unbeliever? And what agreement has the temple of our Creator with idols or idolatry? For you are the temple of our Creator, of the living Creator of this universe. What agreement has the temple with idolatry, with paganism? As he says, and here Paul is quoting the Old Testament. For those of you who don't like the Old Testament, most of the New Testament is quoting the Old Testament, as you call it. It's to be one book. And the Apostle Shaul is quoting that here. He says, quoting the Creator, says, "I will dwell in them and walk among them. I will be their Creator, their God, and they shall be my people. Therefore," this is what he says, quoting again from the Old Covenant Scriptures, "come out from among them and be separate." Separate can mean holy. "Says the Lord, do not touch what is unclean." Now these eggs, like I said, they take these eggs and dip them in the red. That goes back to dipping these eggs in the blood of these sacrificed children and these babies. That's how the eggs got red, the origins. It's going back to the origins. So don't touch what is unclean, even the practices. Don't worship him the way that they have worshipped their gods, their false ones. He says, "Do not touch what is unclean, and I will receive you. I will be a father to you, and you shall be my sons and daughters, says the Lord Almighty." This is what he says. And so the Apostle Shaul is telling us not to intermingle or have fellowship with pagan practices with his day, especially when there's lies and there's false stories behind these things. Like I said, the anniversary of the resurrection of the Messiah this year in Northern California was a Friday afternoon. We had the Pesach, we kept the Seder on Tuesday afternoon. In Orthodox Judaism, they go by a mathematical formula. They don't go by the new crescents of the moon and the visible crescents anymore. So in Orthodox Judaism, they had their Seder on Monday evening this year. And so Tuesday was the first day of unleavened bread. But here you would have 3 days and 3 nights later, you have the midst of the week, not a weekend. So if we want to honor his resurrection, well, let's do it when he was resurrected, not on the pagan practice days. And the first day of the Omer was when he rose, when the wave sheaf was being offered and those particles were going in the air. The Messiah was ascending. That's why he told Mary, "Don't cling to me, for I have not ascended to the Father yet." So Miriam is her Hebrew name. Mary is what most people know her as today in English. But we need to understand these things, that our Creator wants us to worship him in sincerity and in truth. And if we go to Ephesians, let's go to Ephesians. Here's another scripture from the Apostle Shaul, talking to the Gentiles here. Corinth was primarily Gentile as well. Had a problem with blending idolatry with worshiping of the true Creator. And so he says in Ephesians 4, chapter 17, and please don't get offended by this. Please don't. It says, "This I say therefore, and testify in the Lord, that you should no longer walk as the rest of the Gentiles walk, in the futility of their mind. What futility of their mind? Well, if just accepting Jesus and that's it? Are they not? Well, look at this. Having their understanding darkened, being alienated from the life of our Creator because of the ignorance. There's a lot of ignorance out there on these Christian holidays, the origins of them. Because of the hardening of the heart. So please don't be hard-hearted. Don't be stiff-necked like the Israelites were. They were hard-hardened. They were stiff-necked. And the Creator gave them plenty of warnings. Plenty of servants went to them and warned them, as I'm warning you today. If you are still keeping these days, please don't get offended. But be encouraged that there is revelation here, that we can come out of it. As the Apostle Shaul says, if we go back to Romans chapter 12, verse 1, he says, present yourselves as a living sacrifice. Not as the pagans do with human sacrifices or sacrificing animals for dead sacrifices, but a living. You are to live every day in walk with Him. Let's go to that scripture in Romans. It says, I beseech you, as the Apostle Shaul, I too beseech you. Therefore, brethren, by the mercies of our Creator, that you present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable. Again, holy, set apart, to be different, acceptable to Him, which is your reasonable service, or as we look in the Greek, can be translated your intelligent service. Do it intelligently, not just emotionally from your heart. Don't just be a heart Christian only, but don't just be a head Christian only. It's not just about knowledge and information. We do have to have it in our heart and in our head, and be intelligent sacrifices. And do not be conformed to this world, as it says in verse 2, but by the transforming, by the renewing of your mind. You know, not just your heart, but also your mind. That you may prove, that you can prove, and like I said, check up on me. Go to Truth or Tradition. It's also on our free website that's in the description of this message, or you can search it, Truth or Tradition by Passion for Truth Ministries. Jim Staley is the preacher. We have it in Russian, we have it translated in Romanian and in Spanish, and more languages to come, because this is important information. So many people from other cultures and around the world have been deceived, and they don't understand the origins and is it truth or is it tradition, and what are the traditions that displease our Creator? He answers that way better than I can, and he has so much historical evidence and proof and visual aids than I can provide with this little digital camera in our home studio here, living room. So he said, prove what is acceptable and the perfect will of our Creator. Please prove what is His will. Don't just believe any man or any human or any ministry or church or religion, but prove from the Scriptures, prove from credible historians, that you can prove for yourself and find on the internet. Now also, Revelation. Now this Easter goes back to Babylonian origins. As I said, it's a Babylonian religion, and that's why John says this is a mystery. It's Mystery Babylon the Great. This is a great deception, a great mystery, because so many people think it's Christianity, that it's the roots of Christianity, that it's true Christianity, but it's actually Babylon morphed into Christianity. And we need to be careful, because